Astronomy Cast, episode 330, Arthur C. Clarke. Welcome to Astronomy Cast, our weekly facts-based journey through the cosmos, where we help you understand not only what we know, but how we know what we know. My name is Fraser Kane. I'm the publisher of Universe Today, and with me is Dr. Pamela Gay, a professor at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, and the director of CosmoQuest. Hey, Pamela, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing today, Fraser?
I'm doing great. For just one reminder, we had the most epic virtual star party last night. We had for the first time we had Mercury in the daytime. We had Venus in the daytime. We could see this really thin crescent as it just completed conjunction. We had Io pass behind Jupiter. So if you aren't aware, every Sunday night we connect a bunch of telescopes into a live Google Plus Hangout, and we just broadcast whatever is happening in the night sky. And last night was planetary night. We had the moon, the sun, a bunch of planets. It was just terrific. So definitely join us if you want to sort of see what we do with the telescopes and stuff. So
And
that's
if
it.
you want to
I'm so
take
excited.
and if you want to take more formal classes, one of the things I was working on yesterday when I was not doing the virtual star parties is Dr. Matthew Francis, the director of our Cosmo Academy program, was getting some of his new classes posted. So if you go to cosmoacademy.org or cosmoquest.org/classes, you'll be able to see what all we have posted and what else coming up this semester that you can take and you can learn from.
Yeah, Dr. Matthew Francis is a fantastic instructor. He comes in and regularly handles all the hardest topics in the weekly space hangout that we do. So it's great. I mean, his knowledge of dark matter and inflation and
Yeah.
cosmology and stuff, it's great. So I think to learn directly from him and that would be amazing. So sign up, cosmoacademy.org. Cool. Okay, well, let's get rolling. So Arthur C. Clarke was one of the great science fiction writers of all time. He defined the genre and revolutionized our ideas about what it will take to become a true spacefaring civilization. In the first of our two-part series on Arthur C. Clarke, we examine the man's life and his books. Man, I am so excited about this topic, Pamela, because Arthur C. Clarke is absolutely one of my favorite authors. My father was a big sci-fi fan, and so when I was a kid, those were some of the books that I had access to. It was like Larry Niven, Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov, and I would dig through his backlog of books and just start. I was just like, I'm just going to read some of these books, and couldn't believe how much I enjoyed them. Heinlein, it just goes on and on. But Arthur C. Clarke, I think, is one of my favorites. But at the same time, when I was a kid, I went and saw 2001, and it freaked me out. It gave me nightmares for a week.
Oh,
So
wow.
that was a bit of a letdown
What
to go
what
through that.
part of it?
I don't know, the space baby, the bad computer trying to kill the astronauts. I don't know what it was, but it haunted me. So and it actually threw me off Arthur C. Clarke for a while, because
Oh,
just every
wow.
time I thought about that movie, it sort of freaked me out. And so I actually picked up more Arthur C. Clarke books back again when I was maybe in my late 20s. I read Childhood's End was sort of the last one that I read, and it just brought it all back home for me. Like, it's just such a great book. He's so forward thinking. So all hail Arthur C. Clarke. So
It's
what's your Arthur C. Clarke experience?
um I, I I like everyone else. I loved the Space Odyssey movie, and it was like the first time they got so many things right. The fact that your arms float when you're asleep and you have to be in a 5-point harness to hold you to your chair. They had the idea of using magnetic shoes. I loved that they had the space tourism. But then I have to admit, the parts of his writing that I enjoyed the most were very much the rules of robotics. Sorry, that was Asimov. The rules of any suitably advanced technology can be perceived as magic. The notion that if you're dealing with a very senior scientist and they say something is impossible, no, it's probably very, very probable. But if that same very senior scientist says something's very probable, then they're probably right. And I just love the idea that you can't trust a young scientist to tell you what's possible, but you can trust an older scientist to say what's possible but not what's impossible.
Right. That nobody can tell you what's impossible because in many cases what these people think are impossible are, it's just a few paradigm shifts down the road and things become possible again.
And they're
Yeah.
most
Yeah, it's a
often
great way to
wrong.
look at things. And they're often wrong. Yeah. Well, I mean, don't you say that sometimes, science is just a matter of waiting for people to
The
die?
correct
For,
people to
science
die.
progresses when the
Yeah.
right for the right people to die. Yeah.
So one of the things that I particularly loved is one of the things that came out of his Clarke's law of revolutionary idea is the stages that an idea goes through. And this is something that's supposed to apply to science, politics, art, all those different things. When an idea is first put forward, a big idea is first put forward, it's completely impossible. Don't waste my time is the way people react to brand new ideas. Then it becomes it's possible, but it's not worth doing. And when you look back at the early quotes about the internet, laptop computers, programs that used more than 48 kilobytes of memory. That's what you hear. But then in the end, everything suddenly becomes, I said it was a good idea all along. And I love that Arthur C. Clarke was at this point, I find, somewhere in between Heinlein and Asimov, and the three of them were considered the three great science fiction writers of their time, where Isaac Asimov was much more technologically driven, much more embedded in the science. Heinlein was very much into making you consider society moving
Yeah,
in
totally. Yeah.
space.
He really thought about the sociology type parts of it.
And Clarke was balanced in between the two of them, and I just love the mix that came in from having these three men collaborating, sniping at one another, and basically pushing each other's writing forward through the years.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think you really hit the nail on the head, which is that Arthur C. Clarke could imagine a technology like, and we'll talk about this more in the next show, but he could imagine technology and then see how what implications that technology would have on society and back and forth. And I think that in many cases Heinlein would come up with technology like, what if everybody lived forever? And then, but
Right.
like but how would everybody live forever? Who knows? Who cares? But Arthur C. Clarke could be like, what if this technology progressed on the path that it's clearly moving towards? What are the implications of the technology for human society? And he was able to really kind of get the time after time after time. And again, that's what we're going to talk about with the next show, is just how right he was and how well he was able to predict these things. So let's talk about the man then, Arthur C.
Okay.
Clarke. Where does he come from? Who is he? Who is this guy?
Well, he's a Brit. The whole Sir Arthur C. Clarke is because he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II. He grew up at an interesting time in England. He was born prior to um, World War II fully coming out and launching into the Roaring Twenties. So he was born in 1917. Uh, Lived through World War II. Worked on radar technology during World War II. And this is at the same time that we have Alan Turing working on the Enigma machine. Um, and so at the time that he was in England, he was in a very conservative society at many levels. And it's interesting to note that in 1956 he moved to Sri Lanka, which wasn't exactly a happening place at that point in time. It was still called Ceylon. Um, and he went there. One of the sets of reasons he went there is because he was an avid scuba diver, and England is not noted for its scuba diving opportunities. And when he went to Ceylon, Sri Lanka, he was able to take up his scuba diving. He's actually one of the co-discoverers of a major underwater set of ruins. Um, but he was also a homosexual, and it wasn't safe for him necessarily to be a homosexual in England. And he left England 2 years after Alan Turing's suicide. Um, so it's just very interesting to wonder what would have happened had he lived in a more culturally open society in England and had stayed there his entire life and hadn't been exposed to the amazingly diverse culture and been essentially a stranger in a strange land when he moved to Ceylon.
Wow. That's crazy. I didn't realize that that was the sort of the reason that he left the country. He was, I guess, so he was seeing the terrible things that were happening to Turing and wanted to avoid.
Well, it wasn't just him, it was the entire culture. I mean, one of the things that I found when I was reading up about Arthur C. Clarke is he was never openly gay in the sense that we're used to in modern society. He spoke of his lifelong friend. When confronted directly if he'd had bisexual experiences, he'd say yes, but who hasn't? Um, but he never was in complete public denial of who he was. And at the time in what is now Sri Lanka, society was much more permissible. And so he was allowed to live a much more open life by emigrating to a completely new part of the world that was opening up for, well, in his case, colonialism. Um, but it was a complete change.
But he rocked it. I mean, he did
Oh,
a
yeah,
pretty great job of not only continuing to write from Sri Lanka and thrive there, but almost making it a reasonable base of operations for his worldwide influence in science fiction. It was perfectly normal to patch in Arthur C. Clarke from his, from his Sri Lankan home to to comment on this and that.
exactly.
So
And he ran a scuba diving institute, and so it did make sense for him to be there. And as I said, I think it's just so cool that this father of modern science fiction and of so many technological ideas uh, also like helped discover an underwater city, ruins that had fallen in, and it was actually somewhat sad because in the 2004 tsunami, his scuba diving institute was destroyed. It's since been rebuilt, but it was a side of him I wasn't fully aware of until researching this show, and it just shows you that you can have someone who is very much alive on many different facets and making remarkable contributions in everything he does.
yeah. So he moved. When did he move to Sri Lanka? Like in the 50s, right?
1956.
Yeah, yeah. So really, just like shortly after the war, Bug, left the UK, and I would, who would blame him? I mean, you saw what happened to Turing,
Yeah,
who was recently, what was the term they used? He was pardoned.
he was pardoned.
Yeah,
But
which is kind of obnoxious, but
yeah,
um, as opposed to completely acquitted and they apologize for ever saying anything was wrong. But anyway,
right.
but yeah, so I think he decided he was going to go be the person he needed to be and move to a place where he could do that, and I think that's great. So what sort of, where did he go to school? What was his career?
Well, as I said, he was during World War II. He worked on radars. He was in the British military, and it was after that that he went to King's College London and got a degree in mathematics. So he's someone that had the practical experience as an engineer. He went from the practical experience as an engineer to the more formal education of one of the more formal universities in mathematically rigorous science. And from there, he largely focused on writing and communicating science. He's one of the holders of one of the truly great science communication awards, and this comes from his communication of science as a television host, through having a scuba diving institute, from writing science fiction novels, from writing science papers. He was contributing in so many different ways for the entirety of his life.
Right. And so when did he start the sort of the sci-fi? When did that start to happen?
Uh, that started pretty much right after World War II. Um, he wrote some things for fanzines before World War II. You find some early things in the 1930s, the 1940s, and astounding science fiction, which, interestingly enough, is actually available, lots of it, through the Gutenberg Project.
Oh, is it
Uh,
in the public domain now?
it's in the public domain, and that's really
Oh, that's
awesome. So you can
fantastic.
go
Yeah.
back, access it. It's all free. It's all on the internet. He actually had correspondence with C.S. Lewis in the 1940s and 50s, and it said that the two of them met in an Oxford pub that was not the Oxford pub where C.S. Lewis is said to have spent so many hours with Tolkien. And I just find that amusing that the C.S. Lewis Tolkien pub is one pub, and the
Right.
C.S. Lewis
Separate
Arthur
pubs for
separate
the different
pubs.
kinds of yeah conversations you're going to need to have with influential writers. Yeah.
Right, right, exactly. And then it was in '48 that he started to write for science competitions. He had the Sentinel, which was sent into the BBC, um, and it was the start of him starting to figure out things like the writing of 2001: A Space Odyssey, the Childhood's End series. All of these things started after his experience in the World War, when he started to really focus on writing science fiction and seeing that his writing was worth trying to get published.
Right. Okay. And that was the time. And I actually want to do a lot more sort of research. I actually want to do, like with all the videos we're doing, I'd love to do a bit more of almost bordering on a documentary, like looking at that early science fiction, the golden age of science fiction, the silver age, I'm not sure,
Right.
but just all of this amazing outpouring of science fiction, and he was right at the middle of it and pushing the boundaries of it.
And part of where he started was actually his first big break was the 1951, the exploration of space, which looked at what's it going to take to explore space. The name really says it all. You can't really go
Yeah.
beyond that. But it was from writing that he and Robert Heinlein started exchanging letters. It was from writing that um, he started um, all of the dialogues that get the wheels turning. He first met Isaac Asimov in 1953. Those two had a lifelong sparring match over which of them was the superior writer, which I think helped both of their careers, where the running joke was Asimov was the better science writer and Clarke was the better science fiction writer. That was the Clarke-Asimov treaty. Um, so one of the more interesting things is looking back. There's all these different rumors that either Heinlein and L. Ron Hubbard, or Asimov and L. Ron Hubbard, or Asimov and Heinlein, or Heinlein and Clarke and L. Ron Hubbard all had this bet that they could start a religion, or a discussion over dinner that they could start a religion, and different people put forward different lists. One group even said it went so far as it was Frank Herbert and many others that were involved in this, and different books are put forward as different authors' pitches to start a religion. So you have A Stranger in a Strange Land coming from Heinlein, you have Dune coming from Herbert, and then Clarke is said to have been engaged in that as well, and I will let you go and guess which book might have been his pitch for that particular
And,
award.
and you could just imagine the one who was like sitting there really quickly taking notes, right, with Hubbard with Scientology. So you can see
Dianetics.
that a religion did come out of that. Yeah. Well, there you go. And now we know it's true. Okay.
We
So
don't know it's true. There's many different.
no, no,
There,
no, no. The origin story of the universe and the and all hail Xenu. So let's talk about sort of moving on. I mean, then he really became very productive and wrote a ton of
right,
amazing books that we've been talking about. 2001 and Childhood's End and Rendezvous with Rama, and so many books, right? And
right.
so prolific.
Yes, yes. It's kind of amazing to look back where his books continued to come out even after he died. And I remember my dad being all excited because there was 3001, the final Space Odyssey, coming out in 1997, and the Time Odyssey through the 2000s. He had nonfiction that started in the 50s and continued all the way again into the late 90s. He talked about the global village concept. So many of us have heard the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, he changed the paradigm. He was part of the group that changed the paradigm to looking at the global community instead. He was someone who kept working all the way up until he passed away. He had actually just finished reading the manuscripts for his last short story the week before he passed away of respiratory disease. And it's somewhat sad because he died of what is now a largely preventable disease, polio. He had it as a child. It cleared up, as polio luckily often does, but he had polio syndrome, which caused weakness, and some of that weakness was in his respiratory system. He died in his late 90s. He lived a long and productive life.
Yeah, and recently. I mean,
Yes.
it was just a couple of years ago.
It was 2008, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess that's
And
5 years ago. Yeah. No, it's one of those things where I was like, what? Arthur C. Clarke is still alive? What? Yeah.
it's kind of awesome because one of my younger colleagues in astronomy, Thelina, with a last name none of us dare to try and pronounce, who's from Sri Lanka, and was extremely active in the 2009 International Year of Astronomy, was someone who, when he was even younger, was someone who knew Arthur C. Clarke and would be there when they had dignitaries visiting and needed to have the local guide. And just the fact that I have Sri Lankan colleagues that knew Arthur C. Clarke is really kind of awesome.
Yeah. Now, after sort of, I guess, in the 80s, did you ever see Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious Universe?
You know, I had a loser childhood in so many ways. I never saw Cosmos till I was in grad school. I never saw The Mysterious Universe. What did I see? I saw Leonard Nimoy's weird pseudoscience show. I missed all the actual science
Well, I
shows.
think as a Canadian, we got a lot of stuff from the BBC. So we had a lot of Doctor Who. We had a lot of shows and science shows. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Connections and The Day the Universe Changed, all the stuff
Right.
from James Burke, and a lot of those kinds of presenters. A lot of that stuff was played on Canadian television as well. So I did get to see a lot of that stuff.
So what was it like being influenced by this when you were, I guess, high school at the time?
Yes. No, I was still elementary
Middle
school. Like,
school.
yeah, I was still, grade 5, grade 6 when I
Okay.
was watching some of this stuff, and it was amazing. I couldn't believe that somebody was putting the things that I loved most on television, and I could get a chance to see them. And it was same thing with Cosmos, right? It's just I couldn't believe that there was a whole hour dedicated to this. So
And
that's, I mean, that I think is something that drives both of us with what we do with Astronomy Cast and the other stuff we do. Just to segue, is just to try and let people know that you can get access to this information that you love so much, that we love it too, and we're happy
right.
to
Share.
share and pour as much knowledge as we can and give you as much access, more than you can handle. I mean, I can't believe how much wonderful material there is now available for the kids who are in middle school, teenagers who have an interest in this space. So,
And
anyway,
Arthur C. Clarke was someone who spent his entire life trying to find ways to communicate science to people through a variety of different mediums. There was the work on television. There was his actual science and exploration work, uh, in his case, under the sea, which again I find so awesome. And then he also took his thoughts about space exploration one step further, and there's a program called the International Space University that I was lucky enough to get to teach for a few summers ago. They offer masters in space science, but one of their more important programs is they have a summer-long professional certificate program in basically space exploration. You go, you learn about running missions, you learn about communicating science, you learn all sorts of different things. And this is a program that you see the movers and shakers in today's commercial space program consistently attended. And that program, the International Space University, is something that Clark was the first chancellor of from '89 to 2004. And that is just awesome that he worked to communicate not just to the public, but he also worked to professionalize space exploration.
Yeah. And he was rewarded. He was knighted.
He was knighted in 1998 by Queen Elizabeth II. He was knighted not as a Brit, but as someone from the colony of Sri Lanka.
See, that's going to be my way through. As a Canadian, I can get that knighthood. So
Exactly.
yeah. Sorry, Pamela.
I wouldn't want to wear the shining armor anyways.
No, I've already bought mine. It's already ready to go. No. Yeah. Okay. So I think we should probably wrap this up. We already mentioned the way he passed away, and I guess we did mention the 2004 tsunami and the
Right.
terrible devastation that he was affected. So I think next week we're going to talk in a lot more detail about some of the concepts that he brought up, and I think that's going to blow people's minds on the amazing ideas that we now are just live with all the time and think about, and how much of those had really come from him.
And the fact that people don't realize they came from him, I think, says the most about the man he was.
So we're going to set the record straight. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, Pamela. We'll see you next week.
My pleasure. Thank you, Fraser.
So Arthur C. Clarke was one of the great science fiction writers of all time. He defined the genre and revolutionized our ideas about what it will take to become a true spacefaring civilization. In the first of our two-part series on Arthur C. Clarke, we examine the man's life and his books. Man, I am so excited about this topic, Pamela, because Arthur C. Clarke is absolutely one of my favorite authors. My father was a big sci-fi fan, and so when I was a kid, those were some of the books that I had access to. It was like Larry Niven, Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov, and I would dig through his backlog of books. Astronomy Cast, episode 330, Arthur C. Clarke. Welcome to Astronomy Cast, our weekly fact-based journey through the cosmos, where we help you understand not only what we know, but how we know what we know. My name is Fraser Kane. I'm the publisher of Universe Today, and with me is Dr. Pamela Gay, a professor at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, and the director of CosmoQuest. Hey, Pamela, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing today, Fraser?
I'm doing great. For just one reminder, we had the most epic virtual star party last night. We had for the first time, we had Mercury in the daytime. We had Venus in the daytime. We can see this really thin.
Some of his new classes posted. So if you go to cosmoacademy.org or cosmoquest.org/classes, you'll be able to see what all we have posted and what else coming up this semester that you can take and you can learn from.
Yeah, Dr. Matthew Francis is a fantastic instructor. You know, he comes in and regularly handles all the hardest topics in the weekly space hangout that we do. So it's great. I mean, his knowledge of dark matter and inflation and cosmology and stuff, it's great. So I think to learn directly from him, and that would be amazing. So sign up, cosmoacademy.org. Cool. Okay, well, let's get rolling. And just start. I was just like, I'm just going to read some of these books, and couldn't believe how much I enjoyed them. Heinlein, it just goes on and on. But Arthur C. Clarke, I think, is one of my favorites. But at the same time, when I was a kid, I went and saw 2001, and it freaked me out. It gave me nightmares for a week.
Oh,
so,
wow.
That was a bit of a letdown to go through that.
What part of it?
I don't know. The space baby, the bad computer trying to kill the astronauts. I don't know what it was, but it haunted me. So. And it actually threw me off Arthur C. Clarke. Crescent, as it just completed conjunction. We had Io pass behind Jupiter. So if you aren't aware, every Sunday night we connect a bunch of telescopes into a live Google Plus Hangout, and we just broadcast whatever is happening in the night sky. And last night was planetary night. We had the moon, the sun, a bunch of planets. It was just terrific. So definitely join us if you want to sort of see what we do with the telescopes and stuff. So
And
that's
if you want to
next. I'm so
take
excited.
And if you want to take more formal classes, one of the things I was working on yesterday when I was not doing the virtual star parties is Dr. Matthew Francis, the director of our Cosmo Academy program, was getting some